So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ann Newman. I use she, her pronouns. I am currently the Associate Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs and Dean of Students at Rutgers University, New Brunswick. So greetings from New Jersey. There's a few of you from New Jersey, I can see. I'm here because in my role as Dean of Students, we oversee the demonstration response team, which covers student free expression, and that includes protests, response, demonstrations, vigils. I also advise our Vice Chancellor on response and work very closely with our Student Involvement Office, our Fraternity and Sorority Affairs Office, and our cultural centers when issues and concerns happen. So I kind of bring that that larger university perspective to a student affairs perspective to student expression and giving students voice on campus. So thank you all for having me.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. My name is Dr. Komal Chandra. I am a residence coordinator at New Jersey Institute of Technology in Newark, New Jersey. I've been here about 6 years. Simultaneously with my work in higher education, I've also worked at Morristown Medical Center, part of Atlantic Health Systems, more of an administrative sense, but my background is in biological anthropology, public health, Master's of Medical Humanities, and I just completed my PhD almost to the year today in urban systems, focusing on health track. So I look at how the integration of health, education, and environment impacts communities, especially urban communities, which has completely translated to COVID in an urban setting for a higher ed institution. I can give more of the on the ground experience because as a first responder, crisis response, I live on campus. So I am here living in our COVID environment in our professional response, but also in terms of our there's multiple pandemics happening at the same time, which I'm sure we'll get into. And so it comes down to how we're responding as a campus community. I also speak nationally and conduct webinars on behalf of whether it's Trellis Company or other institutions and nonprofits, speaking about how we're working as a community and what higher education professionals can do to respond to collective trauma together. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you both so much. So we're going to jump into our first question. How have recent political and social events affected your students and your campus?
Okay, so I'll start with this question. So I have some of my Rutgers colleagues here, and they would probably be the first to also let you all know that Rutgers students, especially in New Brunswick, they're very highly involved. And when they believe that the administration is not responding appropriately, they will seek action. Sometimes that's with demanding to meet with administrators. Sometimes that's with protests. Sometimes that's with taking over a president's office. So from the student affairs perspective, from what we do, right, is we support students. So what's always really important to us is to be able to intervene and give students an outlet to be able to say what they want to say, express themselves. And that is for campus issues, but that's also for national issues. So last summer, it was very bizarre for a lot of us, right? So the killing of George Floyd really impacted our students, but they weren't on campus. So we really weren't sure what was going to happen. But last June, students contacted us in student affairs, and the students in the cultural center, the students in Black Lives Matter, and the NAACP actually reached out to the Rutgers University Student Assembly, our student government, and they wanted to do a joint demonstration, a rally. They wanted to march on campus. So we worked with them to make that happen. So we worked with the students. They were actually pretty responsible, and they made sure everybody had a mask, everybody was socially distant. We brought our staff in to support students, which is part of our protocol. But we made sure our staff was distanced. We worked with the police in a control area so that we knew what was going on, and it worked really well. In the fall, again, students were a lot more low key because of the vigil, but the the um, the United Black Council asked if they could do a vigil in the fall to celebrate the lives of Black men and Black women that were killed. So again, we worked with them to be able to have a candlelight vigil on the campus in a way that promoted social distancing and mask wearing, but students were able to communicate. So just with a couple of examples, I think for me, what we've really learned is students that believe that have really strong political and social event reactions are going to do that, and they're going to have those reactions whether or not we're in the middle of a pandemic or not. So with, as a student affairs professional, student affairs administrator, it's really our responsibility to help students have that outlet to be able to express themselves in the way that they see fit within the constraints that we might have due to a pandemic or something else going on. So thank you.
Hi, so NJIT is very known for being a school that has the significant amount of diversity, and that is significantly advertised as well. However, I think that, and most of us probably in this room understand, I'm saying room, but I mean Zoom call. Most of us understand that diversity does not mean equity and does not mean inclusion. If you are having increased number of whether just people of color, different diversity, different background, different places, and putting them in an environment and saying, hey, we're diverse, but not providing them resources and opportunities to speak, understand, to make sure that we are providing equitable opportunities, they're going to feel more isolated, right? They're going to feel unheard, and then they're going to feel disengaged. On top of that, realize that, you know, it's not just one department. It's not just your diversity inclusion officer, your chief diversity officer in that department that is responsible for campus wellness and campus diversity. It's also not residence life only. I know those of us in housing are expected to program for everything and support the shoulders of the university as we push forward in terms of wellness, diversity. There's so much more, and it really has to take, financial aid is included in this. Admissions is extremely important in this. So is our marketing and whatever your universities call these different departments, especially faculty. So realizing that through these recent events this past year, we've realized where are gaps and what needs to change. And I think that's a very important lesson, right? Is realizing where are we flawed? Where's that bottlenecking happening in our operations, and what can we do just to do better? And the best thing to do is to ask. Oftentimes, how many times are we all sitting in a meeting and the administrator asks, hey, any questions? And we all look at each other, we're like, we know that wasn't, they're not gonna get it. Is it worth it for us to say? But we all know what we're thinking. So that also happens with our student community as well. They know what they're thinking. And most of the time it's very similar, and it came down to us actually having to ask and hold specific, whether it's one-on-one engagements, whether it's large group engagements. We had our Black Student Coalition meet and a group together. And I think that is what was most important, that students took the opportunity to group together to one, discuss how they're feeling, and two, discuss what is their plan of action? What do they want from the institution and university? And they came up with advice and advisors and professionals leading them, and wrote a letter to the campus community of, this is what we're looking for, and this is what we need, and these are the changes that we're demanding to make our campus, feel more inclusive and safe. I think the question was also, how have these political and social events affected our students and campuses? As we're dealing with the health pandemic, there is a racial pandemic, and we don't realize that racial pandemic has already been affecting the health of your students, mental health and physical health. It's all related and it's all similar. So you may be seeing your students, and we saw our students, they're more disengaged, hypersensitive, lack of focus. So we are asking our students to perform academically, be more aware, attend our Zoom programs, but not realize that they're struggling. And we don't know where they're going home to, right? Many students, we are open at a little reduced capacity, but where is home for your students? If they were asked to leave campus, where are they going? right? What environment are they going into? Are they taking on more responsibilities? So we had to really think about overall student wellness and change our thought process of student wellness to help support just, I guess, the overall campus community during this time. Thank you.
That's great so far. So that is a fantastic start to this conversation. So thank you both. I also just want to acknowledge and appreciate how it just sounds like I'm hearing from your experiences. I appreciate how your campuses, your students sound like they really took a lot of initiative in these situations. And like, firstly, that burden, like also, I feel like a lot of that as administrators, we need to step up, right? But also allow that space for empowerment, that if the students feel empowered to do so, we're giving them the space without the expectation to lead that. So that's a whole other conversation. I'm sure we can get into that and unpack it. But leading into the next question, you touched on this a little bit, but did you and other campus leaders even feel prepared to respond to these things? I'm hearing a lot of, we did this and this is something we thought about, this is something we saw. But were things on the forefront? Were there proactive processes in place? And there may have been, but I'm just curious about how that affected everything that was rolling out on your campuses.
So many of us in housing have served as an on-call capacity or a crisis capacity. So it's a little bit in our blood, right? In terms of something's happening, what do we do? So you have those problem-solving skills, those critical thinking skills. It just comes down to procedure. So in terms of feeling prepared, we have the skills, however, I don't think we had the procedure. I don't think we realized how significant it's one of those, if you've seen the iceberg illusion images on social media, where what you see, what you don't see, so we know how to respond. We know how to send an email. We know how to tell people to take care of themselves. We know how to say, we're here, come talk to us, call and email here. But what is it that we don't see, right? And I think that we didn't see what really can we do as administrators. We don't see what do our policies and procedures reflect what's currently happening right now. We don't see the fact that maybe what departments are doing, we're not talking to each other. We're not seeing that, there's just more tension on campus, and how do we address that? So I feel that we were prepared in some sense of, we have basic skills, we have great staff. I don't think we were prepared in what is our output, what is our stance, what is our, how are we going to tackle this head on, rather than being reactive. And I think that oftentimes we're reactive. Something is happening. Okay, I need a person, Kai, I need you to handle this. And you're going to do this program and it's going to be great. And, Hannah, can you please handle this for us? So it just turns into who can we pull? And then that starts to drain our staff, because now we're not being intentional about what is our process to make sure that it's everybody's doing the work. Like I said, it's not just one department. It's not just one person. I think that we did look at other campuses to see what are they doing. And sometimes we in higher ed do this whole, oh, what's Rutgers doing so we can follow suit? Or what is the other campus? Because we're all just trying to figure out how to navigate, or, okay, we're going to close our campus at the same time that somebody else does, just in case. And there's that fear of backlash, because we are scared about how is it going to look to our campus community, and realize that now we need to be in the forefront. I feel that we did respond in terms of how prepared. I think we realized some gaps, and that comes down to how do you educate your staff and train your staff better? There are so many, I just signed up for a diversity and inclusion certificate. I mean, we've been doing this for years, but yes, you too. I hope to see everybody there. I realize that there's so much, I've been doing this for over 10 years, right? But there's more to learn, and maybe you know it, but now how do we apply it? How do we educate? How do we teach others? So we have to realize what are those nuances, and how can we be creative? Because right now we have to do it hybrid, right? Virtual as well as in person. And how do you come up with these systems that can benefit everybody? On top of that, in terms of feeling prepared, we had a good staff. We still have a good staff. So how do you motivate your staff? We realize, how do you spread the work and spread the wealth? And ultimately, we realize we need to speak more to our students understand what is it that they're looking for and respond to that. When an email isn't enough, the other thing is we used to send, our president would send emails maybe a little after an event would happen, or maybe not at all. And recently what I've noticed is an email is going out quite with much better timing. And I know an email isn't enough, but it's a good place to start. It's a good place to start and acknowledge. And then there's a lot that needs to happen in terms of follow-up, but it was a good place to start to show at least, hey, we are working on things, but with actionable items. So that's what I would say is how we felt and how we responded.
That's great. Thank you. And Dr. Newman, I definitely want you to respond to that as well. But I really appreciate that last point about the actionable items. I think those are the best responses I've seen. Like, we get sick of the ones that are like, this happened and we stand with you, but how? Like, tell me what you're doing. So thank you so much for bringing that up. I just wanted to like highlight that because that was gold for me.
Right. Yeah, this is a real tough question, because I think the answer on most campuses will probably be yes and no to this. And I think even at Rutgers, I would say that we were prepared. We actually were unprepared back in 2014, 2015, when the initial Black Lives Matter protests were happening. We also had a controversial speaker at the same time. And we had issues, campus issues where students were, they took over the president's office, and there was a lot of disruption, dissent on our campus. And I got approached by our general counsel at the time and a lot of other people that, the president really wants something done. How can you all do this? And usually when I get contacted to change a policy, and sure, I'm glad to change a policy, we can make things more clear cut, but it was really clear to us that we needed protocol for what to do, and how do we respond, because I totally agree that those of you in residence life, I was a res life person for 8 years myself. And then I worked in the Dean of Students office. So, we are trained on, an incident happens and we respond. So I think people have those skills, but people need to know what the protocols were. So we spent a good amount of time in 2015, 2016, creating protocols for how to respond if students wanted to express themselves, but also how to take care of our students. So, we talked about where would healing spaces be? How do we get out resources to students about CAPS and our meso practitioners in the cultural centers? And how do we get out information to the academic departments so that they know that students are facing these issues and they can address those behaviors? So the Dean of Students office was typically the center of the wheel, and then the spokes went out. So residence life wasn't the only department having to work on this issue, but clearly they were a part of it. And I think what I really appreciated about the protocols we put in place is that it became a responsibility of all of student affairs. Now, that being said, should this just be a responsibility of student affairs? No, we can talk about that forever, and that's a whole other webinar, I think, for all of us. But at Rutgers now, we have a diversity, inclusion, and community engagement office that's been a couple of years old. So we're now starting to partner with them on a few things. So I'm feeling very positive about that. What I will say that, in terms of what we were not prepared for, some campus incidents that happened, and I'll just speak of one. That I don't know. I mean, I'm sure Zoom bombs hit everywhere in the country, but during Black History Month, there were quite a few of very similar Zoom bombings that happened in the state of New Jersey. Because I think Rider had one, another school had one, and then some of our Big Ten colleagues where they came in. So our Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity was hosting a program celebrating the life of Paul Robeson, who pretty much is our most famous alum. It's during Black History Month, and Zoom bombers came in and showed vile video of Black men being mutilated, along with slurs and all of that. this was a student program. They didn't know what to do. We were not prepared for something like that to happen. It was a police investigation, so we were letting the police address it. We were working with the fraternity, and a message went out, but the students really didn't feel like that was enough. We didn't think broadly enough that this would impact the entire African American community and our people, everybody of color at the university. So I think we definitely could have handled that situation better, and we're still in the process of doing that. So I think we'll talk about this later, but when something doesn't go right, I think a big piece of being prepared to lead and respond is to be able to debrief after a situation in terms of education. So to be able to what went well and what could be done better. So whenever a situation happens, whether it goes well or whether we have some glitches, I want to know what I can do better so that this doesn't happen again. And we take that information and include that in prevention for the next incident. So for me, that's a big piece of being a leader in these situations. It's not just responding, it's learning and making the process better as you go along. So, I can do follow up on any of that stuff later, but that's pretty much what's going on right now on my campus.
And I think that by your responses, you kind of touched a little bit on our next question, but feel free to add more, of course. So tell us about your processes and procedures your campus has to support students in times like this. And, as recent as what's going on right now within our Asian community. So I'm super interested, especially larger institutions like Rutgers and NJIT that are heavily diverse and, really serve as, the foundation of, that culture for our students. So what did you do within your areas to support these students?
Sure. I'm sorry. You go.
Okay, cool. It comes down to this, right? What did you actually do? I mean, we always talk about what's best or where maybe Kat, hi. But it comes down to what have we actually done? And I think that a good that came out is that there was effort, there was change, and it was better than the usual, hey, it's Black History Month or it's Women's History Month, and everybody do a bulletin board that's themed to your campus community. And we're only going to do these bulletin boards in February. Like, no, there has to be more than that. Black History Month is every month. Women's History Month is every month. We should be programming, we should be educating throughout the year. And I think that that is something that I have been pushing, our department has been pushing more, that we need to do more. On top of that, we had a very robust Black History Month program this year. And I think that that involved different departments as well as using that Black Student Coalition as well to make it more robust. It comes down to money. The university put money towards this programming, and whether that comes down from the students requesting, administrators requesting that if we want people to attend, if we want to spread awareness, if we want to have good program, we need to have the funds to do so or the resources to do so. It might not be money, it might be having a speaker, it might be, having time up, whatever it might be, but you need to, if something is important to you, put resources towards it. And sometimes that takes us to push back, to ask for it, to set up a good example of this is why we need these resources. This is why we need this fund, or this is why we need X, Y, and Z. We had somebody come in who's a budgetnista, a Black professional who I think we purchased like books in terms of that we were giving out, and she's very costly, very effective, and very amazing. But why? Because students said, hey, I want to know more about this, because we have to realize that there is wealth inequity due to, especially for people of color, and realize that there's a history behind that. There's a science behind that, and understanding that, and then figuring out what can we do about it and how do we work on our financial education. We had that for our wellness. there was a speaker who came to speak about wellness, and everybody who attended got, I think it's $100 gift card to a spa or some type of wellness activity. Do you see what I'm saying? We're actually saying, hey, we want you to do well. Here's an effort, something you can do for it. And it was a whole month of programming that was beyond the, hey, come to this webinar so we can have a conversation. It's come to this webinar so you can learn X, Y, and Z. Come to this webinar and you will attend this, like actually putting resources, getting the right people, and getting speakers. Beyond that, I have hosted webinars for our institution. And like I said, nationally, bring in experts. We might not know everything, but bring in people who do. So spend that time and you can always ask. I mean, many of us have budgets. However, if you say, hey, I'm looking for something intentional, what can you do to work with us? Many educators realize that the whole point is to educate and bring our campus communities together, reach out to resources, and also you can partner with other schools, partner with departments, and I think that is important as well. The other thing which we did well, which also will work on what everyone should do, is up your social media game. That is key during this time and beyond, because students get emails all the time. I get emails all the time and I kind of glance, don't tell my supervisors, but you glance and you do the best you can to retain and then execute what you have to do for your day. Our students are doing the same thing. They're getting emails from the university, they're getting emails from different departments, their classes. It's a lot to sort through. So how do you know what's important, what's not important? Either it's coming through having a different methodology for saying these are programs or this is what's important to you, but I would up social media game, up your followers, up your engagement, work with different departments and tag them. Our social media is one of my colleagues. She has upped our game and looked at different marketing strategies utilizing Canva, but we are advertising about the new marijuana legalization in New Jersey. What does that mean? But we are on behalf of our institution putting information there. I created an infographic series about Stop Asian Hate and for Asian American and Pacific Islanders. If anybody wants to share it, those materials are on my Dr. Komal Chandra Instagram. I can also upload it to MCUA website, but utilize people that are experts that are creating materials, share them, because people see what you're posting. They see that you're making it normal to talk about wellness, normal to talk about diversity, normal to talk about these things, because that is how our students have been, picking up information. And beyond that, I think restorative practices are extremely important. And it comes down to, are you willing to take the time and stop your day and listen? And I think that is one thing that has done, I think the most growth is for me to actually understand. And I'm not listening to respond. I'm listening to understand what is our campus experience. I'm listening to understand what are the actionable items. And I might have to explain what can be done and what can't, but it comes down to also, why can't we do it? Right? We didn't have a chief diversity officer, but that's not an excuse, right? That's not an excuse. That is something we as an institution need to advocate for. And it takes work and it takes effort. And I know all of you have a lot on your plate, but maybe we do need to take that time to collectively say, here's why we need this. Here's why we need this programming, or here's why we need a specific job to be created specifically for diversity and inclusion or wellness. Think about those gaps. And so we just hired a campus health director, as well as we have a search for a chief diversity officer as well. So that's what our processes and procedures are, and that's worked during times like this.
So I'm going to start by echoing the social media and what are you doing as a person to support your students. I went to a program yesterday. The week's just kind of melding together, but NASPA's this week too. I don't know if anybody else is at NASPA programs, but I got to go to an AVP program that focused on digital leadership and the impact that you can have that you don't even know you have on students, because they're following you, they see what you're posting, they see your information, your resources. So students are seeing some of that. They're not always the same places we are. I have an 11-year-old, she's on Discord. I have no clue what Discord is, but I hear our students are on Discord. So that might be the next place I have to be. I don't know, but if you're going to be on social media, I definitely think you have to be authentic, and you better be watching what you've posted before. I don't know if anybody saw, John Oliver just called out the woman from the talk, I'm from The View, that, she supported Meghan McCain. She had supported Trump's stance on China back in the day, and then she posted something about Stop Asian Hate, and she got called out for that. So be authentic, be genuine, and a student may tell you and thank you for what you did, and you may never have met that student, but you made an impact on them. So I also mentioned that, we really, I work at a large institution. Everything focuses and functions on process and protocols. It really helps us do what we need to do and come together and respond when things happen. So I posted in the chat some of the information that we put together for our students when it came to free expression activities. And we have a small demonstration response lead team, but we have like 20 to 30 plus professionals all across student affairs trained to help us when students want to do large expressive activities on campus. Our purpose when those happen is to keep students safe and stop disruption. So we're there, we support them. We also work with students from beginning to after the expressive activity. And that includes working closely with the police so that if the students want to shut a street down or march, we can do all of that with them. So we're trying to build trust and rapport with not just us, but with the police in Rutgers and New Brunswick as well. Our protocols, as I mentioned before, also include, when a situation happens, reaching out to students, sharing resources with students. There's always the question about, and we could spend a lot of time just talking about this, but we aren't typically the people that are sending the emails or making the statements. They're coming from vice presidents, presidents, chancellors at a higher level. Sometimes there's a delay in those responses getting out, and we're all sitting there thinking, when is this going to happen? This happened, we had an incident that happened on a Thursday at 6, and something didn't get out from our administration until Friday night at 9 p.m. And it was email. What student is checking their email at 9 p.m.? So there's always that question of what are we doing in the meantime? And for us, that protocol typically means we are calling students individually. We are calling, and by we, I mean student affairs. So it's people from the Dean of Students Office, people from Res Life, people from the cultural centers. And we are providing through social media resources for students. Usually that would be our CAPS office, our counseling office. They'll do healing spaces. So you want to do all those things ahead of time in case the message doesn't come out. So students know, listen, the university is here and we're supporting you. Because you can't always guarantee that a message will come out. I will say that I think presidents and chancellors are more willing to do statements now than they were a few years ago. They're also much more willing to call something out for what it is because students are demanding that. But it still doesn't come out as timely as I think it needs to. So that's where we can use our social media, send out individual messages, contact students individually. It's also really important, we kind of talked about this, but the educational programs, not just for students and student leaders, but also for student organizations, advisors, so everybody kind of knows how to work together on this. And the other point that I want to make really clear, it's part of our protocol, and it's something that we really reinforce with the upper administration, that if students want to meet with administrators, we are going to try to get them to meet with administrators. So students like me, but I'm not necessarily the person they always want to meet with. I'm an AVP and a dean of students. I can do a little bit. I can make changes. I can make some things happen, but I'm not making the big giant changes that students need. So between myself and our vice chancellor and others, if students need to meet with the president or they want to meet with the president, and we think that's what needs to happen, we'll make that happen. We just had a bunch of students, South Asian students, that were upset at how at the Twitter and the practices of a faculty member. And we were able to arrange with the chair at Newark, because it was the faculty members at Rutgers Newark, the student organization, and we had a representative from their advisor and a representative from our vice chancellor's office went up there, and the students were so happy at how things went. They're not necessarily getting what they've asked for, but they at least were heard by an administrator. So we do our best to make sure that our chancellors, our vice presidents, our presidents know, just meet with these students. It's going to make a huge difference. Just meet, like some of the academic deans, just meet with the students. It'll make a big difference. So that's a part of our protocol to see if we can make those meetings occur. Okay.
Thank you. That's a really good reminder. I think sometimes we get so caught up in the response and what to do and what to say, we forget to do, as both of you said, is to really listen to and trust our students. It's about hearing them, and there are things we should be doing without even asking them, right? And that being proactive piece that you talked about, but also trusting our students and truly listening and allowing them that space. I mean, that's step one. If we're not doing that, we're in a bad place. But I feel like that also leads to our last question. Then we can allow questions for the audience. So as they answer this last question we have prepared, folks who are listening, feel free to start dropping questions in the chat as you think of them. So what we have last is, what can other campuses that may be less prepared, but paying attention now, do to get into a better position to serve students? So we know we're not doing enough. Maybe we know and hear of a lot of good things going on that we could be doing. So what can we do to be proactive in the future? And what do we need to do to get everything together to serve students better next time? Because we know, unfortunately, things are going to continue to happen.
Okay. So we've covered this, and I'll just say it again. I think it's really important to pay attention to your students and communicate that information up as soon as you hear something. What we've really learned over the last 10 years from a lot of different examples at a lot of different universities, that it can take a simple incident that's not addressed appropriately to become a large campus issue. And for a lot of us in the Mid-Atlantic, we are in media zone. So, you know, some of us are in two tri-state areas. A lot of you are in the Philly tri-state area, the New York tri-state area. It doesn't take much for something to become really huge. And that has a large impact on, and that usually gets the attention of our presidents and our chancellors, because something that's not handled appropriately that gets media attention can impact campus reputation, enrollment numbers, perception, and most importantly, fundraising. And so people don't like that at all. So I think when you go back, you know, these are conversations to have within your departments, and making sure that information gets taken up the chain, that if we don't do this right, there's going to be a huge impact on our campuses. So that should be enough motivation for folks to want to do something. I really think it's important to let students know what they can and cannot do on campus. So the differences between private schools and public schools in terms of constitutional rights. But if you are a private school and you express to students that their speech is protected, you need to make sure that you allow that. Also, from a student affairs perspective, I talk to staff all the time about looking at where students are developmentally, and how these incidents impact them, and how can we help them with their development and make every incident that happens a teachable or learning moment. I had a boss that always did that, and I used to roll my eyes and get so frustrated when she'd say, "Where is the student developmentally?" But it really can make a difference and help you figure out how to help the student. We talked about moving beyond statements, but I also think it's really important to be able to talk to central administration about statements to the community and when it's appropriate for them to occur. I think timing of these statements is really key. Because if we're silent, or we're silent too long when something happens, students will perceive that no information is either a lack of caring or that the university disagrees with the students or disagrees with the issue. And both of those things could be completely untrue, but that's the perception when it comes to silence. So the other thing universities need to do, and we can do this on our own social media, the university should do it in statements, and it should be communicated everywhere, is that you want to call out exactly what happened. We used to say there was a bias incident and not really talk about it, and we are past that now. So we call it what it is. Is it racist? Is it anti-Semitic? Is it homophobic? Is it misogynistic? Is it xenophobic? Call it out, and let people know what the resources are if they're impacted by it. But I think first and foremost, you can't ignore it, because there could be consequences.
Thank you, Anne. My thoughts were all over the place, so I took notes and I numbered them. So I'm going to go through that with you. So I came up with like 4 areas. I would say, like, what can you do? 4 areas. The first thing is be honest. We're not always going to get it right. We are learning, we are navigating, and I think it's sometimes okay to stumble and be honest than pretend that we have our stuff together and that we're perfect and that we're ignoring things. And I think the biggest thing is to be honest, be vocal, and be proactive. Second, Anne touched upon no policy and no procedure. When we started having discussions about protesting, what is allowed, what is not allowed, and if it is allowed, in what capacity, what resources can students reach out to in terms of, if you do need to speak to the police, here's your contact information. Make it easy. And follow up with organizations and follow up with individuals. If a student comes to your office for a missing package, did you also ask them, how are you doing? How are you doing this semester? Use those moments. When somebody asks me what's the most important thing that you can teach another colleague, is the importance of 5 minutes. And hell, the importance of 1 minute. That 1 minute conversation that you're having with an individual can stick with them, so that they need something, they know they can come to you. They know that there's a rapport beyond just the, hey, I am here as an administrator and I only do administrative things and I'm robotic. No, there's a person beyond that. So making your departments personable. Secondly, is if you want to affect your campus community, support your staff. So if you are in a place of leadership and you are supervising professional staff, take care of your staff. Is your staff well? Are you doing some type of rotational work from home? Do you understand the barriers that are occurring for them right now? Are they home and you were their boss, but now their boss is their like 3-year-old child and their doggy, right? Things are changing, and we have to realize how your professional staff is impacted so that they can be the best. If you are supervising student staff, realize what is on their plate. Just because classes may be virtual does not mean they're easier. Sometimes they're worse because it wasn't really integrated as best as possible. So be aware of these things, support your staff, and it's not business as usual. We cannot just expect our staff member, student, professional, even above us, our administrators, we can't expect the same things to occur and then add on, and we need you to do diversity, and we need you to do wellness, and we need it all as other duties as assigned. It's not going to happen. So if those other areas are important, then that means you need to take something off their plates. What can you do as a swap? How do you explain what the priority is, and how do you explain what the importance is? I think it is also important to discuss what are our operational plans, what needs to be changed during this time, what is our mission, and how does each department or how does each person follow into that mission. When you understand what your purpose is, when your staff is on the same page, when your students understand, oh, as an RA, this is what the intent is. We want to make sure we are celebrating diversity throughout the year. We are educating what resources throughout the year. It helps us all be on one page, one alignment. What else? We talk a lot about other departments and maybe faculty is not on the same page as student affairs, things like that. Bring them in, call them in. Maybe we need to take that step and say, hey, faculty, here's a list of resources that you can share with your staff. Or can I come in for the first 5 minutes of your freshman seminar? Can I come in for the first 5 minutes of whatever class just to talk about these resources? Often faculty want to help. They don't know how. So maybe we need to bridge that gap. And that might take talking to a, provost, that might, but start the conversation. Exactly. Partner with different campus partners and talk about what these needs are and work towards it. I also encourage you to challenge. We tell our students, use your voice, stand up. Y'all have a voice as well. So if you feel like there's a need, we can do it professionally, but explain this is what the gap is, this is what the need is, this is why, and this is what we're asking for. We can collectively do that as well, whether that's we need to take something off the plate, or we need more clarity on what is our mission, or we need to hire somebody. You know, we can't run. We had 3 psychologists on campus only for this campus community. We needed more, and that came from student voices and professional voices. Also, advertised resources. There was money. I apologize. There was money for financial aid relief for coronavirus relief fund that people didn't know about. Students didn't know it was there. So make sure you're advertising resources that students can utilize. Is there counseling? Are there group therapy sessions? Things like that. Advertise, which also we've already talked about it, but work on social media because that's very, very important. Lastly, I would say do research. Tap into those of on your team that know research. As somebody who just completed my PhD, I'm tired, but I understand the importance of it, because literature review, what are other campuses doing? What is the need? Do your qualitative and quantitative assessment. Do we not have numbers about how students feel? Can we not do a pulse survey and ask students, how are you feeling safe on campus? On a scale of 1 to 5, how safe are you feeling? What is affecting that? What are you looking for? You know, based on limited even participation, you'll have a base to figure out what area should you target. Otherwise, you're kind of just reaching, right? When you are doing this research, use the right words, and completely talked about that. Is it xenophobic? Is this white terrorism that's happening? Are we talking, what are we talking about? What is the right word? For Asian hate, I defined it, it's race-based traumatic stress. It's not just that students are tired. This is traumatic stress. This is a form of PTSD. This is affecting health and wellness. This is affecting your brain chemistry. This is why our students are not, you know, being successful. Many times we feel things, but we don't, but there's a word for it. Use the word, use the terminology. Is this racist? And I think that's very important if institutions practice that behavior as well. And then once you're done with researching and assessing, the important step is, what is your action plan, right? And how do you showcase these results? I would say utilize your student leaders. There are organizations that don't know what to do, right? They're looking for ways to get involved and make change. Tap into them, because they have, you know, participants in their organizations and groups. Use those student leaders, whether it's Senate, whether it's your hall councils, whether it's your RHA, or just any other student group, the gaming club. You can utilize anything, everybody, and say, hey, we want to have this program, or we want to put some money towards an event for you. What do you need? This is what we found out. Can you help share these results? So tap into other departments, tap into those student leaders. So those are my 4 things in terms of like, what can you do now to be prepared? That's what I had come up with. And I hope it helps.
Thank you both for answering, you know, so adequately the questions that we formulated, but we have some really great questions that are in the chat. And so I want to really make sure that, you know, the participants get the information, and whether it's from the panel, those who are here on the webinar, please feel free to answer what you're doing at your institutions, as this is our think tank, right? We do this together. And as Makuho Family and Association, you know, that's really the way that we've grown this past year, is by knowing what best practices are happening for each other in our institutions. So Kai, I hope I'm saying your name right, Kai. What steps are being taken regionally and at individual institutions to staff, specifically those whom have been affected by the consistent devastations, prepared to provide resources to students, fellow staff members, and how can we further engage our campus partners to make sure we're holding ourselves accountable to the action items we set? That's an excellent, excellent question.
You know, I think what's been so difficult about the pandemic is that we've lost a lot of our connections with our campus partners, especially when you come in new, right? A lot of staff that started right when the pandemic happened, they haven't met anybody in person yet. So I think that that's been a real difficult piece for a lot of folks. You know, from my perspective, I think I can answer the second part of the question. That, for me, I love to hear from colleagues. And if somebody contacts me and says, hey, can we get together and talk about what we're doing in terms of advising? Can I talk about a program that I think will work with X, Y, or Z? Or I know you do this, can we talk about this? Because I have some thoughts and I really want to know more. So I would say don't be afraid to reach out to campus partners and just find out what's going on. Let them know what your concerns are. I think it's a tough year. I personally don't think we've done enough to support our staff. I don't know. It's been tough on everyone because we've had folks that are dealing with these challenges. And I agree. I think that this is race-based trauma that a lot of folks are feeling. Plus it's pandemic. We've had a lot of death and a lot of loss in students and their families. Sorry, there's my Mario. And I think we could be doing a whole lot more with that. So I'd love to hear what others think we could be doing for the first part of the question.
I'd like to follow up with one thing I appreciated was that the central office staff or people who don't live on campus, there was a rotational coming into work once we started opening up. And that was good, but we didn't realize that those of us that live on campus have still been working there was a time I was working 20 days in a row just 2 months ago because we had opening, we had check-in, we had this, and then we had to have every COVID test checked, and it was a lot. And I understand that's our role, and I understand this is why we're here, but it is a lot. And we didn't, I guess people didn't realize that we have been working in person every day as well. And so our department decided that we would allow our residence coordinators to also work from home one day to promote that, balance of mental wellness and work-life balance. I think providing resources is very important in terms of, even if it's a one sheet that can be utilized and referenced, it helps when you create that library so that one person doesn't have to pull all the time and look for research and look for how to verbalize things, what wording to use, have that prepared. Also, it cannot be the same people constantly asking for change. It cannot be the Black people in the room. It cannot be the people of color that are always asking for what are we going to do? They cannot be the ones to always ask those follow-up questions. And so whether that's somebody else has to stand up and say it, or even if you have to say it, hey guys, it is very tiring and it is very exhausting and draining to constantly be the one that students are coming to, staff is coming to, I need help. And sometimes you need to say that. But if you are a supervisor, I challenge you to check in with your staffs and ask those questions, see what we can do to follow up. And then in terms of holding accountable, I think that anybody can hold everybody accountable. Like a student can ask administrator, what you said you were going to do this, where are we on that? But it does come up with, we did a restorative listening circle and I said, can we schedule the second date now? Start ahead of time, realizing what is our plan. We can't just have one restorative practice and say, okay, we're good, because, the semester flies. And I think once we understand that concept of, spring semester for some is in a different time warp than fall, what do you need to do? So I would suggest that we timeline follow-up dates so that they're meetings. And even if you need to push it back or schedule again, but set those milestones and follow up in that way. That'll help in terms of holding departments accountable and people accountable as well.
Great. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, but maybe we can have just one response to our last question before we leave. Just as we wrap up, I'll read it quickly to help with that. So, beyond an email, what can be done by leadership to show our student staff, for example, RAs, that they are cared for and appreciated considering our current virtual climate? If there's maybe one or two tangible suggestions for that.
I mean, I've spoken for a few of you here, your RAs. I would say bring in an outside speaker to specifically talk about health and wellness, and I can help you with that or provide you other resources if you're looking for someone else. 2, take things off their plate. We reduced our programming from 2 active programs, 1 passive program to 1 active, 1 passive. I polled them and I honestly asked them, I was like, what's your favorite snack as a treat during like one of our like team builders? And I went and I got them for them. And they were like, what, how did you know I liked fruit snack? Like it was the smallest things matter. Listen one-on-one. I would up your check-in and beyond the whole, how's your floor? How's your team? Ask those one-on-one questions, even if it's through a text, an email, or during a meeting. I think those 3 things may help to support, you know, the whole I see you. And I would also say be lenient on things of when bulletin boards are due and somebody says, I need a, you know, can I have an extension? I'm more lenient on extensions because I understand that there's just a little bit more happening during this time.
That's great advice. I'm telling my staff when they're concerned about needing an extension or something like that, I'm telling them now is the time to survive, not the time to thrive. So whatever you need from me to make that happen, let's do it. But thank you. There was a lot of great stuff here. I took notes. I am like texting colleagues. So I hope everyone who's able to view this online gets just as much out of it as we all have. But on behalf of Makuho and everyone, I hope who was able to attend today and will view it when it's posted online in a couple days, thank you. We appreciate your time. I know something we talked about on the call was resources, and we know resources are slim pickings, but our best resources in Makuho are our people. And you are 2 of those people who gave your time today, and that is no small thing these days. We know how busy you both are, so we are very appreciative. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for being here.
All right, bye,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone. Have a great day.